As I said, we are ready for the intervention from Mr. George Niculescu. I will say a few words after the first session. It was quite a treat, isn't it? With very interesting initial presentation from the speakers and then very entertaining conversation, very short. I was looking for more in-depth dialogue. But hopefully we'll have the chance, me, my colleagues at Energynomics, will have the chance to build up some interviews, some conversation with some of the speakers earlier in the first session of the day. I will now give the floor to Mr. Niculescu. Thank you very much for being with Energynomics once again. Last time outside Romania in Istanbul, Turkey, the other side of the continent, but also earlier in February when we started the conference season this year. This time in a country where we come with Romanian companies in order to find investors and to showcase the Romanian capabilities. And there were two key ideas for me after the first session. First of all, Romania is interested because of scale. And it was very interesting to hear about Saudi Arabia-sized projects in Romania, 1 gigawatt, for example. And the second idea, we are everywhere. Romanians are everywhere, and they are not only Romanians, but are very international kind of guys. So, George Niculescu, Honorary, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, because it's already noon. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that I'm speaking after the first panel gives me a huge opportunity, and it gives me an strategic advantage. I was able to adapt my speech from 6 pages that were prepared by my colleagues from the authority. I have resumed in only 2 due to the fact that I was authority and the government and the regulator from Romania received such good words from the panelists. I now resumed my speech from 6 pages, as I was saying, to 2. So thank you, Energynomics, for inviting me. Madam Ambassador, thank you for hosting this event. It's a huge pleasure for me to participate from Constanța to London, from Bucharest to Istanbul. It's good that we have a platform that gives us the opportunity to meet and to exchange views, the public sector and the private sector. And I think that throughout these conferences, we can see the true effects of our policies, and I'm talking from the position of President of the Regulatory Authority, how our regulations are affecting the market. And I cannot begin my speech without saying that in the past years, Romania have assumed the role of regional leader because the conference today, it's about Romania's energy future. I think also in the future, Romania will be assuming and will be playing a role of regional leaders. You cannot say Romania without saying big projects in the region, such as the small modular reactors, first country in Europe that are going to deploy this type of technologies, so pioneers in this regard. You cannot say Romania without saying the fact that we plan to double up the size of our nuclear power plant in Cernavodă by adding 2 more units, units 3 and 4. And I'm saying this also taking into consideration the fact that previous from this position, I used to serve for 2 years in the Ministry of Energy as State Secretary, and I know how important nuclear project is for our country, for our security, and for our energy independency. Also, in terms of natural gas, you cannot speak leaders in the region without saying Romania. We have the largest production of natural gas in the European Union, and we have more than 100 billion cubic meter of natural gas that are waiting to be extracted from the Black Sea. Black Sea is a very important region. We are talking about Black Sea. We cannot talk about Black Sea without saying the fact that it has a very important energetic role. Of course, the panelists spoke about the energy transition, the first waves of renewable, the lessons that we learned from the first waves of renewables, and the fact that nowadays renewables are still booming in Romania. In 2024, Honorary released more than 6,000 of megawatts setting up authorizations. That means that projects that already secured financing were released setting up authorization for 6,000 megawatts, and 450 megawatts were licensed. This means that these projects are producing and selling energy into Romania's energy market. In terms of strategic projects, I have to refer of the Azerbaijan, Georgia, Romania and Hungary cable, green corridor that will link these four countries and will make Romania very important in the region throughout this piece of infrastructure. That is very important. This piece of infrastructure, in order to be successful, it needs two things. It needs to have tariffs and it needs to have a license. And both of these things are the job of Honorary to provide. This is why I'm saying that this project, it is very important, not only for Romania, but for the whole region. On top of that, we are the first country in the Black Sea region that has an offshore wind law. We are pioneering in this regard. Last year in June, we adopted the law that is setting up new economic activities in the Black Sea area, and hopefully we will have investors that will be searching for opportunities also in this sector. I remember that we included in the law, while I was in the Ministry of Energy, also a support scheme for 3 gigawatts of offshore wind projects. So this is something that will stir the interest of investors, hopefully. Very important, batteries, hoping that we'll see more batteries installed in Romania in order to lower down the prices of energy when we have huge demand, and I'm waiting for new investments in storage capacities in 2025. Also, from a strategic point of view, we cannot overpass the fact that for Moldova, it was the first time when gas flowed from west, not from east, and literally Romanians kept the lights on for 3 winters in the Republic of Moldova. Just a bit of context in terms of the war that is 200 kilometers away from Romania. PPAs and prosumers. A lot was discussed in the first panels regarding this. Let me say that prosumers are very important. They are a new actor, a new star in our energy sector. We are trying to cope with the levels and numbers of prosumers that are choosing to product their own energy near the consumption places. And all these levels of prosumers and all these huge numbers of green investments, we can cope that with only by having huge investments also in the distribution networks, in the distribution grids, and in the transport networks. And in this regard, last year we have approved new tariffs for the distribution companies and the new WACC for the distribution companies, which, if you listen to the distribution companies, it's not very stimulating. But if you look at other countries in the region, the level of WACC, I say that it is a reasonable level of WACC. Hoping that we will see soon huge investments in the grids in order to cope with all the investment appetite that you saw in the panel before me. Huge plans in this regard, and the grids needs to be ready to take in all this energy. I want to stress out the fact that Honorary is a facilitator. We are supporting business in Romania. We are not a bottleneck. I'm looking for different ways to decrease the bureaucracy, and in this respect, this year I will be having good announcements for the market. After revising the regulations, I will in the next month I'll be making an announce that will decrease the bureaucracy, but more in the few months regarding this. And also, I would like to stress out the fact that we will continue to closely monitor the energy market. We will act as we did in 2024 and in 2023, will act like a silent guardian of the energy market, but we will firmly sanction any company that is breaking the law. Hope that I will not have so much of these occasions. It's a bit tricky to keep a balance between what the investors need, and I heard about the predictability need, the stability, and the fact that we need to provide a safe and healthy environment for investments. And also we have to look at what the consumers are affording to pay for the electricity and for the natural gas. And this is why I was saying it's a bit tricky, because consumers need affordable, clean, and secure access to energy. This is our role, to maintain the balance between what the investors needs and what the consumers are willing to pay. Hoping that the framework that we are providing will increase the investments in the renewable part. I want to tell you that I'm an open to dialogue guy. My office is open to the investors that want to have good and clean investments in the energy sector, and I am willing to dialogue with each and every serious investors that want to build up the energy sector in Romania. Having this in mind, I would like to thank you for the attention and wish you a good day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Niculescu. Please just stay for one moment there. One or two questions from the audience. Please, I saw a first hand raised, please.
One question regarding offshore. So you mentioned about Romania having its offshore law, and as I know, the offshore roadmap was launched last September. So when should we expect to see and hear more about offshore projects being developed in the Black Sea, especially as we are here to attract investors as well? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. The offshore law that we have worked on while I was in the Ministry of Energy is presenting every milestone an investor needs in order to secure an investment. While we tackled this law, we didn't have anything prepared in Romania. We didn't know which authority is providing a building permit, who is leasing the seabed, who is releasing the setup authorization and stuff like this. Now everything is written in the law. I think that in the near future, the Ministry of Energy needs to conduct the leasing of the they need to conduct the draw of the perimeters so that the investors will know where to explore first the wind capacity, the load factor, and other things. You know it better than I do. And after that, they will continue by leasing these perimeters. At Honorary, I think that Wednesday we will be, so in 2 days from now, we will be approving the authorization and license for offshore wind projects. So we are in term with every milestone that the law has provided us, and we will keep monitoring everything in this respect. Thank you.
Bună ziua, domnul Niculescu, mulțumesc pentru overview. I'll ask the question in English. Emir Osmani from Morgan Stanley. How does Romania secure the physical security of offshore wind assets once they become available?
This is a good question. Thank you very much. How does Romania protect its investments in the Black Sea in producing natural gas? We are producing natural gas we have a long history of producing natural gas in the Black Sea. Now 2 years, 3 years, 2 years, another company, an American company, started to produce natural gas in the Black Sea. It's called Black Sea Oil and Gas. We had no problems regarding the safety of these investments, and as we are securing and providing a safe environment in the Black Sea for natural gas producers, this will also be available for the offshore companies that want to set up shop in Romania and in the economical zone of the Black Sea region.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your answers, and you also for the questions. Thank you very much. The offshore wind, very interesting. One more question?
I think the gentleman.
Okay, please.
Hi, my name is Cătălin Sibișan. I'm from Liscom Brașov, Romania. I just want to ask you regarding the batteries. You said we need a lot of batteries, which is true. But we also knew that the battery has a term of life. What are we going to do when the term of life of the batteries are gone? What happened with them? How we do recycling? We recharge them? What are we going to do? Thank you.
What are we going to do with the panels after 15 or 20 years of using them? What are we going to do with the wind turbines after 10 or 15 years or 20 years? Refurbishment. We are going to upgrade, we are going to invest in refurbishment, and if the technical opportunities are there, we are going to upgrade and improve them. I think every new technology has risks. We cannot wait until we see that what are we going to do with the panels from the first wave of investments. I think that already in Romania, producers of renewable energy started to refurbish their solar PV power plants by changing the inverters, by changing the photovoltaic panels with new one, with better technology, upgraded technology. I think that if we can recycle plastic, if we can recycle clothes, we can recycle glass, aluminium, microconductors. I'm not an engineer, but what is a PV panel? It's glass, it's aluminium, it has microcomponents, glass we can reuse it, aluminium as well, microconductors as well. So I think we will not have a problem in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. George Niculescu, for presence and for your insights. Thank you very much. I think this is the right moment for me to thank our strategic partners for this conference, and I will mention in a particular order: BRCC, British Romanian Chamber of Commerce; CEEC, Continental Europe Energy Council; International Association of Oil and Gas Producers, and Șerban and Muzneci Associates. And I left for the last mention Romanian Center of Energy, because the president of CRE is here with us, and once again he will help us to bring some more power to this conversation. Mr. Corneliu Bodea will moderate the next session. Thank you very much, and please join us here on the stage. I will ask you to take this seat here. Thank you very much. I invite also on the stage Mr. Andrew Buglass, Honorary Consul of Romania in Surrey and Kent. You can choose whichever chair you like. Mr. Joel Burghoff, Associate Director Energy Europe with EBRD. Mr. Edward Randolph, Investment Director with Amber Infrastructure. Mr. Wandile Mamba, Vice President GE Vernova Financial Services. Elena Popescu, CEO Elektra Renewable Support, a company was mentioned earlier. And Ciprian Bodiu, Head of Sales Parapet GmbH. I think that Mr. Niculescu mentioned one of your projects, because from what I know, there is just one project in Romania, refurbishment of PV power plant, and it was your work involved there. Mr. Bodea, the floor is yours, and all the controls.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I must start with a confession. I hate being playing this role, being a moderator. You know, I prefer being, asked question, not asking question. And I also don't like that I will have to be quite strict with the time. So my proposal, a bit of housekeeping, would be to have a general question, then some direct question to each of you, and leave some time for some question from the audience. Now, I believe you can agree with me that we are living spectacular times. This might be good, this might be challenging, but indeed, generally speaking, in the last couple of years, I'm considering here the pandemic, then the energy crisis, energy price crisis, and now what is happening in the international arena with the huge change in politics. We indeed have a lot to discuss. I was also following the previous panel, and it looked to me very serious, very nice image related to what is going on, what is happening, especially in the renewable energy sources domain. But we need to also remind ourselves that we are living in a time when we overpass already 1.5 degrees centigrade, global warming limit that we imposed a few years ago. We are also living in a place where, the new U.S. administration is asking, drill, baby, drill. We hear from Washington. And at the same time, we live in a place in Europe where there is so much attention that is going towards competitiveness and the way to generate cheap energy, not expensive energy, in order to re-industrialize the European economy. So that's why I would like also to bring into discussion, I will suggest to my great panel here to also bring the discussion into this, reality environment where there are a lot of challenges. And my first question will be addressed, the same question to all of you, and this will relate to our team, the panel team, which is market entry strategies for companies. It's also how to raise money for investing into projects, or how to navigate in the bureaucracy and administrative environment in order to realize a project, and not last risk management and how to deal with the future and the volatility of the prices in the energy sector. And my question would be whether you are a player and an investor or an advisor. If you are an advisor, what would be your advice to companies that would like to invest in Romania in these renewable energy sources? related to these topics? Or if you are a player or you are a financial institution, what would be the path that you would take in order to progress with projects in Romania? And I will start from you, Andrew, please.
Thank you, Corneliu. Let me start with a very quick background, because I sit here as Honorary Consul of Romania, but I'm also somebody who's been involved in the energy sector since the early 1990s, in mostly project finance. So I've worked in a lot of markets, I think over 30 countries during that time. I haven't done anything specifically in Romania since 2007, when I was doing some refurbishment financing with one of my previous employers for Rovinare and Turcen. So that's very firmly not a renewable project. But I think, to answer your question, what I find very interesting is we've heard about the opportunities. I think there have been a lot of good illustrations of that in the earlier panels. And I think the challenge is perhaps best illustrated with something that I did in my previous role with Royal Bank of Scotland. We went through a similar process of introducing contracts for difference in the UK, and it was a fairly lengthy process. It took us about 4 years, starting in 2010. And at that stage, I was chairing a group of about 40 different investors, both banks and equity investors. And the purpose that we were, or the specific task we were set by government was, please tell us exactly how capital will react to the types of policies that we're proposing. And I think what followed from that was a very, very healthy dialogue. It was sometimes quite energetic. Obviously, investors had certain things that they wanted from the CFD, and I think Maria was talking to that earlier in the process that has been gone through in Romania. But I think the biggest factor from a regulatory point of view that came through was there are three things that really make a good policy. One is transparency, one is predictability, and the other is clarity. And I think as long as you have those three, then you give investors somewhere to look. You give them the tools that they can start to interrogate. And I think the critical thing that worked particularly well in the UK's process on CFD was there was this very healthy dialogue. As the regulations were being brought forward, investors were reacting real time and saying to government, this very specific and very, very detailed part of policy that we've been discussing will likely have these consequences on the availability and the cost of capital. And I think that is a healthy environment. That is an environment in which investors and people who advise them can make informed decisions. So that would be sort of my starting point. I don't want to hog the answers, because there are many others who have...
Thank you very much. So a healthy dialogue, open dialogue between the industry, the government, the investors, and the financial area will be, kind of... I believe that also Romania is, improving in this type of open dialogue, and that was clearly mentioned previously. Joel, please, what's your insight?
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for the invitation, first of all. From our side, we've heard from Maria before on the policy side from EBRD, but then we also have the financing side, where we obviously finance projects and put the money to work on the basis of the policy that we've worked on. As an institution, we have our regular energy strategy, and that was updated last year, where we had a bit of the mantra saying, okay, we want to move from megawatt to gigawatts. And so last year Romania was one of the markets which actually allowed us to implement that. And I think it was previously reported we financed nearly 1 gigawatt of renewables last year. But just to put that into perspective, that's more than we've done altogether the previous 12 to 13 years since we financed the first wind farm in Romania. So we've seen a huge change in scale in Romania, and there's a couple of kind of catalysts for that. One, I think we've heard previously, is the reduced cost of the cost of electricity of the investment. But then that together with the kind of policy signaling from the government that long term that's a market that can have scale. There's a CFD, but then even before the CFD we had people actually investing based on those signals. So from our side, that's clearly a market that has matured a lot and allowed for that investment. But we also see that there's a lot of potential for further maturing and further investment to kind of continue at that scale. And one of the things is that obviously that scale is difficult to get elsewhere in Europe, as we've heard as well from other panelists. And so one of the advantages that we see or potential is that also some of the larger projects in Romania can be built there and can have a regional impact that is wider than just the local impact. Over the years, we've had a lot of market integration across the EU markets, energy markets, and that obviously allows some of the investments to have a wider benefit than just locally. We've seen some of the indications of that in some projects, but I think there's still more opportunity to have a wider European impact actually from these investments and projects. So that's some of the kind of key things we see in the market. And then we obviously still see some further inefficiencies in the markets, where we see some room to move ahead and maybe move closer to what we've seen in other countries, be it balancing costs, be it the kind of cross-border PPA, depth of PPA market. And overall, as a financial institution, obviously we are a price taker. So as an international financial institution, we don't set the margins, but we see that if you have a market that is maturing, taking away some of these risks, we hope to see further also improvements in the financing cost, so that those financing costs will come down, and that will further kind of fuel the cycle that you can have, again, lower levelized cost of electricity, which again allows more investment. So we still see a lot of room to improve there, but we've already seen a tremendous change in the scale so far.
Yes, this is a very, good message, to see an institution like EBRD giving such a positive, message, moving from megawatts to gigawatts, and, believing in Romania as a right environment to invest. Indeed, of course, there are plenty of things to improve. We can understand that. Edward, please, you, Amber Infrastructure, already a big investor in Romania, already having a local, company that you play a role in. What's your feeling about, you already have some experience in Romania. What's your feeling about it?
Sure. Well, is that on? Can you hear me?
I think it will start to work.
Slide up.
Yes, please.
Yep. Okay, brilliant. We actually have 3 investments in Romania. One very large one, which I think people may be familiar with, which is a renewable energy company called Honorary, which is, I think Romania is Honorary's largest market. We have 170 megawatts operational in Romania. But we also have another renewable energy company, R Power, which has recently won a number of contracts for difference. And we also have a rolling stock business, which Amber has structured an investment into, cargo unit, which is operating in Romania. But we're very positive on Romania. We have an unusual role. So Amber is the exclusive investment advisor to a fund called the 3Cs Initiative Investment Fund. And it's a 1.2 billion fund that's dedicated to investment in Central and Eastern Europe. So in some respects, we have to look at Romania because it's the second largest market in the region we cover. We also have local investors. So Exim Romania is one of our large investors in the fund. So we're very positive on Romania, partly because we have to invest in Romania, but also I think having spent more time in Romania, it's clear that it's a hugely attractive market. I think we've talked a lot about the renewable resource. I think maybe the bit that gets less attention is just the quantity of gas in Romania. I think that's going to be very important over the next 5 to 10 years. It's the largest producer, as we heard earlier, in Europe. Very highly educated workforce. It is a good place to do business. The rule of law matters in Romania. That's not always the case across the EU. So we're very positive in Romania. We see huge opportunity in Romania. I think just coming back maybe to your original question, which is about how do you secure investment for Romania, and maybe some of the things that we see there. Romania is very unusual in the sense that of all the EU countries, it's both an EU member but not an OECD member yet. So Romania and Bulgaria are the 2 countries that are not part of the OECD, and that really matters. That's a huge issue. So if you look at broadly across Europe about who's generally funding energy projects, and projects generally in infrastructure, a lot of it is being funded by infrastructure funds. So funds like the one that Amber manages, but also KKR, Brookfield, all these kind of big fund managers that have infrastructure funds. They've raised hundreds of billions over the last 15 years. most of those funds will have a restriction that means they have to invest in OECD countries. And that's not to exclude Romania. Most people don't even realise that Romania is not in the OECD, but they put that in their fund documentation, and it means they're not able to invest in Africa or parts of developing Asia. But it also excludes Romania, and that's a huge issue. And I think once that OECD membership is sorted, and I understand it could be this year, it could be early next year, I'd expect to see a huge capital inflow into Romania because it has that rule of law, it has all the attractive market features. It's just this technical membership that needs to be organised, and that would be a game changer. I think the other thing that we see as a quirk in Romania is that pension funds in Romania have increasing amounts of capital available. The issue, which is extremely unusual, is that pension funds in Romania are not allowed to invest in infrastructure or effectively precluded from doing so by regulation. That's very unusual. Globally, very few countries have restrictions that prevent pension funds from investing in funds or directly in projects. I think if that could change as well, that would be hugely impactful, both because those pension funds can invest directly in funds and projects, but also it means that you can co-invest with Romanian financial institutions if you're an investor. So if anyone in this room is looking to partner with a Romanian financial institution to make investments, it's a much better story for your investment committee if you partner with one of the large Romanian pension funds rather than being a new entrant on your own.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very good that you pointed this OECD membership. I am also happy having here the Prime Minister Consul, just a quote of last days. Just to show you how determined Romanian government is to get these memberships as soon as possible. The Prime Minister said that he will not leave this job before having the OECD membership, which is quite a strong commitment, so that's important. And also, indeed, a lot of money in the pension funds. We see a lot of pension funds coming from outside Romania, investing in Romania, and not the local pension funds, which is important.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's much easier for a pension fund from more or less anywhere else in the world, never mind Europe, it could be a US, a South American pension fund. It's easier for them to invest in Romania than it is for your own financial institutions in Romania, which, over the longer term to us doesn't make sense. We think there's an opportunity there to make a very small technical change to the regulation that would be to everyone's benefit.
Yeah, thank you. So, Wandile, I was already talking to you before starting our panel, saying that I would personally love to see more GE, in Romania, as we are mainly, based on equipment from other European manufacturers and also some Chinese manufacturers. So, although you are from the financial services division, but your main scope, I understand, would be to support the GE Vernova coming more into the market and playing a more important role. What's your idea about what kind of strategy, what are you planning to do in Romania in order to bring more substance?
Okay, thanks. I guess firstly a bit of context on GE Vernova. So we spun off from the rest of GE 2024 actually. So we're a new but very old company. 75,000 people odd in 100 countries, and we power 25% of the world with our turbines, wind turbines and gas turbines. The current GE Vernova business is a collection of all the GE businesses that did energy before. So we've got an electrification business that does transmission, does battery storage, so we're actually big on the storage solution space as well. We've got the wind business, onshore and offshore, and my colleague Maria is here if you want to talk a bit more on the equipment side. And we then also have a power business doing kind of thermal gas production. Within financial services, which is a division within GE, our mandate is to support these GE businesses. And we support them by leveraging our balance sheet. So I sit in the investing side of GE, so we use our balance sheet to invest in these countries or in these projects. But we also have a capital solutions team that does arranging of ECA to help projects be cost competitive as well. So to the extent that you're using a GE machine, you can leverage ECAs from Euler Hermes, from Serve in Switzerland to lower your cost of the projects. And hopefully, given what's happening in Romania, that's an avenue. On the investing side, we cover EMEA here in London, so we cover Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We invested in Spain, so we've got a JV there developing an IPP in Spain with the Saudi developer. We have a platform in Italy, which we are invested in as well, another development plan, a platform, a gigawatt under development, looking at onshore wind, but also storage solutions, so looking to prepare for the MAXI program in Italy, hopefully later this year. And also here in the UK, we support a battery player, because obviously that's the big space here. As well, we look at Portugal and then look at Romania as a sub-country. Now, in Romania, GE is actually quite significant. I think we have about 20% of the market share for onshore wind and the installed capacity. We've got a team in Romania that actually looks at onshore wind. But from the investing side, I think we've been looking at it for a while on the investing side. I think, obviously, we've had things to consider. And for us, on the consideration side, is we're not a long-term holder of these things. So we are happy to support developers, maybe go through construction, COD, COD plus 1, COD plus 2, and then potentially look to exit. So some of the things that we've had to get our minds around in order to support our businesses in country in Romania, hopefully to help us get a lot more market share, has been what's the off-take strategy? And that's been a difficult question to answer because we don't have the appetite that others might have of taking market risk, for example. So it's been a difficult question to answer. What's the off-take strategy? And the CFD helps a lot, right? So that's been a really good positive development. It makes our conversations at the investment committee a lot easier. And the virtual PPAs that I guess people like Resolve are doing exceptionally well, and it'd be good to exchange notes with them. Those kind of layers in the off-take strategy are helping people like us make these decisions. And I think what he mentioned around we have to get out of COD, COD plus 2 once we've supported the project with our expertise. We need liquidity to sell down to. And at the moment, it's been challenging to find, okay, COD, the first question of the investment committee is, at COD, COD plus 2, who do you sell this to, right? And I think that's another significant question that hopefully is improving, as you said, with the OECD change. But that's one of the things kind of we've had to get our minds around. And then I think the last thing, people have long memories, so it's important to answer the question, these are the rules, will these always be the rules, right? And I think that's the important question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's very good to hear that, and I believe you will probably do more into, promoting to the EPC company environment in Romania to know that, you can provide such support for GE equipment for the next projects. I think this is important to make the Romanian market to understand that.
Yeah, so just to add, absolutely. And I think at the moment, for example, we are supporting a developer in Romania with a very big pipeline, and we're supporting them through the development phase with technical expertise, potentially supporting them with grid connection costs, this kind of thing, helping them optimizing their sites, etc. So using internal GE resource, and we absolutely can do that, right, to support developers.
Thank you. So, Elena, you are quite well experienced in Romania energy infrastructure, both EPC, also services. What can you tell us about what your particular type of services as Elektra Renewable now provides, and what's your experience coming from what is happening in the market?
Hi everybody. I will just tell shortly about a bit about us to understand how we are at this round table in London. Actually, we are the independent service provider that takes over whatever is invested or built. We just discussed about that. But we actually started as investors in the first wave of renewables in Romania. So 15 plus years of experience is what we can offer to the table for this discussion. We invested in that first part, and we are still investing also in the new wave of renewables in Romania on our newest solar and wind power plants. The thing is that we took this 10+ years of experience to gather information in order to secure and to be able to deliver the best solution from dispatching point of view, meaning the dispatcher operative management of wind and solar or any power plants, to operation maintenance or technical solutions of improvement of the power plants. The thing is, I was looking on my colleagues that already spoke, and I realized that we already work with part of my colleagues. We operate GE wind turbines. We have some assets of some of the previous colleagues. We operate then whatever in my left hand is built. So it's very interesting that also here we realize that approximately the same people discuss about this strategic energy future of Romania. I would also like to say that it's not new for us. The UK market, for example, is not new for us. Sorry, I come after a flu and I'm still a bit dizzy. We also operated in the past approximately 70 megawatts of wind power plants from Scotland, from our dispatch center. What I wanted actually to underline is the fact that there are no boundaries for our services. So we come on the table with our experience, and yeah, let's see what will come.
Thank you very much. I'm not coming after a flu, but I'm also dizzy, so no problem. Ciprian, you are already, well-known Romanian, construction company to the renewable energy sources. What's your feeling about, what kind of strategy do you follow in order to increase your business in Romania? What kind of risk do you see in the future?
Well, this is a. Can you hear me?
It will start.
It will start. That's a very interesting question, but first of all, it's a very interesting question. But first of all, please allow me to thank Energynomics for the incredible job that they are doing in Romania and all over Europe. I've been last year in Athens at another great event, and this is even nicer. So thank you very much for putting all of these people together that are interested in the same sector. Regarding your question, as a personal opinion, I really don't think that this is the second wave. I mean, it was the first wave in which producing energy through renewable resources was incredibly expensive. And I was reading an article in the Financial Times, and it was written there that in the course of a lifetime of 33 years, the watt dropped 99% in price, the wind dropped 67%, and storage dropped 97%. So if 12 years ago took a lot of money to build renewable, today I think it's sustainable. So I don't think it's a second wave. I think it's a transition. Now, when I was very young, people were talking on TV, and I didn't understand. But I was just following and understanding that the life was very difficult because everybody on TV was talking about economical transition. And I was seeing my parents that, the money that they were earning from month to month were not enough and stuff like that. And everybody had this excuse, it's an economical transition. Well, I think it's happening right now with the energy transition. Of course, someone said earlier that Romania has the biggest gas reserve in Europe, and they're right. But Romania is a team player. It's not just one play one player. It's a team player. It's part of this big team that's Europe. And Europe does not have the natural resources, to sustain itself. So the only way that Europe can be independent is through this renewable energy. That's my opinion. Moreover. Also last week I was reading a very interesting article, and the CEO of Ukraine's biggest private energy investor was having an interview, and he was saying about how Russia attacked the energy sector from Ukraine, and it hit it on 3 levels. First, the cyber attacks, and Romania is not unfamiliar with that, and also the classical producing elements, and then the renewable sector. And the conclusion of the article, which was very interesting, was saying that it costed Russia 5 million euro for a bomb, and it cost a lot less for private companies to repair the wind turbines or the photovoltaic plants or the trafo stations, and they were doing it in 3 to 5 days because they had the equipment on stock. So it's not just independence, but it's also resilience. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, because it started huge, and now I want to talk a little bit, just a little bit about us. We started in 2009 in road safety, because Parapet in Romanian language means guardrail. And in 2011, one of the founders' friend, because we are using the same ramming machine for the guardrail, asked for if we can give a hand for a 17 megawatts power plant, PV plant in near Brașov, and we did that, and then we start building. And then the funny thing is that after the Romanian market dropped, the first country that we came to was UK. And we had our first project in Playmont, and then our first full scope construction in Vormit, if I'm not mistaken. So we've worked here until 2016, 2017. Now we have offices. The headquarters is in Cluj-Napoca, but we have offices in Bucharest, and we also opened a market in Germany, and we have a focus market there. And also this year we've opened the Italian market. And not only a new market, but also, different things in construction. For example, last year we started building our first wind projects, and right now we are bidding as a full scope EPC in wind projects, and also BESS. So I think I think in 5 to 10 years, Europe, in what energy sector is concerned, will look totally different. Totally different, because US has natural resources and Asia has natural resources, but I think that Europe will look totally different, and it's funny thing is that last night I was, before going to bed, I was looking because last week I was in Rimini in a very interesting fair. I was looking at the consumption. Italy has had last evening at 7 o'clock, 451 gigawatt spot consumption. And that's huge. That's huge. So, renewable energy and storage, I think, is the only way that Europe can become independent.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, very optimistic. So I would like to start all over again, but with a bit of different touch, and I will ask Andrew. Look, we have this pressure, obviously, from all over, China, US, but also inside European Union. Pressure on the energy prices, a pressure for re-industrializing economies, a pressure to becoming more localized and less globalized. What would be your advice as your advisory company or advisory activity to an investor who would like to invest, say, in energy projects in Romania? To go for renewables, maybe a mix, maybe even the resources, the natural resources of Romania, gas, also hydro. What would be your advice? Which way to go?
Gosh, that's a hard question to answer. I think if you look globally, the trend is obviously, as has been noted already, the downward pressure on renewable production. And if I think back to the first renewables deal I did back in 2005, I think it was very much in that context of the government has decided that it wants to do this, but it's very expensive, so we're going to provide subsidies. And I think obviously, and this is self-evident, the thing that unlocked the rapid development of renewables to where we are today was the point at which we had sufficient investment into renewable technologies that they were competitive without subsidy. And I think that was the game-changing moment. I think the interesting thing that strikes me now is we're not looking at an either-or. It's probably still both. And I think that what I would expect is for investors to be playing to their particular strengths, that if they are particularly strong in developing, let's say, onshore or offshore wind. Offshore is a very interesting sector given the scale and the price compression that has happened, albeit there have been some setbacks in the last couple of years from a materials point of view. Stick to that, but it's very clear that as you look across the European markets, there is still a clear need for gas as a transitional aspect. And I was in some discussions last week here in the UK where the government here has set out very, very ambitious targets to be zero carbon by 2030. And one of the speakers was from the committee that advises government on how to achieve those targets and whether the policies that are in place are likely to support that. And the first thing they felt they had to do is, well, what does actually net zero mean? And they came up with a definition which was, essentially not more than 5% from fossil sources. And even within that, that's assuming a massive ramp up in storage. It's assuming a massive ramp up in all sorts of enabling technologies to allow the intermittency of renewables to be offset by other things. And I think specifically what I would think is one of the biggest challenges that we face in Romania, as in most markets, is which way are we going to go? Because if you're investing in, let's say, EV, or in any of the other renewable technologies, there is a very real risk that over the life cycle of that asset that you've invested in, the policy decisions that get taken on how does storage play, how do we balance the grid, what sort of policy environment do we have, will potentially radically change the economics of that project. And I think that was arguably less important back in the, if you like, the good old days where we had 15, 20-year PPAs that were nice and robust and we knew exactly what we were going to be getting. We're not in that world anymore. People are increasingly being forced to take, and being prepared to, because the tools to manage this risk exist, to take much more volatility, much more price risk. And if you look at storage, I think it's a really interesting example. I advised a client in 2016 on the first round of battery auctions here in the UK. And there, the capital providers were struggling with the concept that you were only going to get a 4-year contract for part of your revenue, and all the rest, you didn't actually know how you would be paid, you didn't know which bit of the market you would be being active in, and you were having to make a 10 to 12-year investment decision on the basis of a little bit of predictable income for 4 years. Now that's radically different from going all the way back to the early 90s when I used to do 25-year PPAs and you just sort of looked at the creditworthiness of the off-taker. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and I think back to my point in the opening remarks, it's as much down to industry to tell the policymakers and to help them build things that are fit for purpose, as it is for for the policymakers to be listening and establishing, yes, we are going to, none of us knows which way this transition is going to go. It's happening very rapidly. We have huge technological disruptions, which are very exciting, but they're also very scary from an investor point of view. And I think the best we can hope for is that there's a longer term direction of travel, that we have an aspiration to get over here. And I think then you can start as an investor to manage some of those risks. But I do think we are in for both a very exciting but a very uncertain time ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I believe that's a very good advice, and indeed it's very complicated to advise someone what to do in this context. Joel, now EBRD is a huge investor in Europe and also facilitator for investments, for more investment, and you for sure do some plans, for the future. And now seeing what is happening, the Draghi report, the Clean Industrial Deal, which is somehow open the door for, more interventionist policies of the government towards the price of the energy. And what's your feeling? What do you believe this will impact the environment for you as an investor, that you want to make sure, of course, that the project will pay back?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe a couple of points. So I think the direction of travel, remains clear. So, we generally, there's the Paris alignment that we're kind of looking at the net zero targets. So I think it's more the way, how do we get there? And we also heard, and if we think about a couple of years back, it's a rapidly changing environment, also a rapidly changing market that you have from year to year. So in that whole process, there's a kind of couple of points where, one, there's the policy of kind of setting the predictable scene for investment, but then leaving room to the market and market forces. So a lot of the things that why we're seeing now the increase in investment is because there's a price signal and there's a market demand and market response. So yes, policy engagement is important and clear to set the long-term strategy and to remove barriers. But it's also very important to leave market forces and send the right signals to which then private sector players can respond. So from that perspective, over-regulation also would be kind of productive. And so I think it's really important to find that right balance of, the giving the policy signals, but then also letting market forces also play the role. But then obviously, we've also seen from the EU kind of working a lot of that towards that. Yes, giving certain guidance, but then also asking countries to reduce their permitting requirements. So kind of really trying to remove barriers where possible. We've also started this year, for example, with other financing instruments from the EU, which are supposed to help with the risk-taking of financial institutions and also reduce the financing costs. So the InvestEU financing program is something we started last year, which we've also applied in Romania to reduce the cost of capital, reduce some of the risks that the kind of policy angle couldn't take away. And that kind of combination of policy angle, letting in market forces, but then also selectively including instruments that can help the whole sector develop. I think that's important, and then to keep staying agile with the sector and technology developments that will inevitably kind of continue to occur.
Thank you very much. So, Edward, more or less the same question. You as an investor, looking at what is happening and the pressures all over Europe, also in Romania, and given the mix of type of resources Romania has, what's your do you adjust your plans for Romania? Do you take into consideration a change that might come in the next years, or you
Sure. Two factors that I think maybe we could comment on there. So Mamba is part of a wider group which is US based, so we have a large US shareholder base, and I think one of the things that we can do quite easily in Europe and here in the UK in particular is just focus on the green agenda, and that's really important. It's definitely the direction of travel, but it's worth saying that in the US there's been almost a change overnight in terms of attitudes to renewable energy. And we're seeing that at all levels. So our investors are increasingly saying they don't want to invest in renewable energy. And in fact, they're precluded from investing in managers that invest in renewable energy. And you see that trickling down through the entire investment community in the US. So we're not changing our plans as a result of that, but I think it'll be interesting to see how that does impact attitudes to renewables in Europe. I mean, there could be a subtle change, whether it's a major change or a subtle change, I don't know. But it's something we should be aware of, and sometimes we miss because we're Eurocentric. I think the other thing to think about is the war and how that ends. We obviously want the war to end, but I think one of the slight sort of downsides potentially for the sector of that is, if it is an end of the war where Putin is welcomed back into the international community, and if Russian gas starts to flow again, that has a major impact potentially on power prices. So you're looking at certainly a short-term issue, maybe a year, 2 years, but we've seen some consultants reporting a 50% reduction in power prices across Europe, which makes a lot of projects uneconomical, particularly if they're not hedged or they don't have PPAs in place. So I think we could see quite a rapid shift where companies that don't have hedges, don't have PPAs, are put under immense cost pressure, and we could see a bit of a change in terms of who's operating. So I think having contracted cash flows and batteries is key.
Thank you very much. Very good points. And because you touched the point on Ukraine, that's very good because that's the next question to Wandile. Obviously we all look for a peace in Ukraine. Of course, with differences of opinion, we all hope that this peace is going to be strong and will stay for a long time, not only, checking someone's agenda, but probably you look into what is happening in Ukraine, considering the volume of investment that has to be, invested there in order to rebuild the power structure of Ukraine, both generation, but also transport and distribution. Is this in your plans, in your company approach, or you plan something for that? Do you consider Romania like a kind of starting point from where to tackle Ukraine, or?
To be honest with you, I don't think that, at least the business I sit in, financial services, we think about necessarily Ukraine in that particular way. I think as a business, GV will want to supply where we can to support those economies. And I think to the extent that, and I think we typically across the chain, right? So for us, gas is a transition fuel. We've got gas turbines. If an economy, including Romania, requires gas turbines to support their transition, as a transition from something that's a lot, dirty, I suppose, in a coal sense, we will do that. We'll support wind turbines for renewables. We'll support batteries for grid stability. So as a business, GE, we've got products for across the transition space. And I don't think, where the geopolitics lands, that's one place, but whether our business can continue to support countries to provide products, kind of lands where it lands, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, because I believe that if we have to consider, I had a very interesting meeting with the previous CEO of the transport and distribution company in Ukraine. And he told us, it was not only me in the room, he told us about the level of destruction, and how difficult for them is to sustain the continuity of, energy flow. And I assume that the volume of equipment and the works needed in Ukraine is going to be huge. And probably that will be giving to all suppliers, EPC companies, and investors a good place to build. So, Elena, what's your feeling about Romanian potential in renewable energy sources for the next couple of years? Do you believe we are kind now in a maximum, or we are before that? Is that, things will calm down in the future? How your company feels that?
We are not at the maximum, we are not at the minimum, we are on the right place as planned, let's say, because nobody expected to have actually thousands of gigawatts to be constructed. So we are in the right place. These new constructions will still happen in the next couple of years at least. And then from the construction point of view of new projects, both solar and wind and storage and gas, because all these technologies together with the nuclear, like Mr. President, Honorary President said also, are complementary. So they these technologies realize the balance that we need on the energy. After finishing the construction, we'll start from our point of view, we'll start the retechnologization of whatever is operational since 2010, 2011. The mix of technologies, wind and storage, solar and storage, what was built before, will for sure add up storage with the final scope of balance. It's life cycle. This is the life cycle. This is my point of view.
Thank you very much. So, Ciprian, what can you tell us about what projects are you involved in now, or you focus in the future? And the same question for you: do you see Romania in photovoltaics, let's say, being where? Close to the peak, it will stay like this for a while, or it will just calm down in a couple of years? What's your plans?
Thank you for the question. I will start with the second one. In my opinion, when you ask Elena the question, the first thing that popped into my mind was the Pinesc strategy and edited one, the later one, and I just took my phone out and looked at it. And according to that plan, in 2030, Romania has to have around 8,000 megawatts, 8 gigawatts in photovoltaic and 8.3 in wind. I think, and to go more, 15-20 years ago, Romania became an internet hub. It has the biggest hub in the fastest internet in Europe, and I remember that back then we were joking that so we will download movies faster. But in the meantime, Romania became one of Europe's biggest IT suppliers, as in software. Now, before the panel started, there was the chief of Honorary that was telling us about the fact that Romania will become an energy hub. And I think that Romania has a big potential regarding this. Yeah, right now we are consuming on spot around 6 to 7.5 gigawatts. But I think that combining, making the hybridization between the PV park and the wind farms and storage, I think that we will become Europe's one of the biggest renewable energy supplier. So to answer your second question, in 2023 we've built a photovoltaic plant inside of a wind farm, right? And we made the first hybridization. And it's a hybridization because of the fact that the grid permit did not change in value. And this year we came back and we are building storage in the same park, and we're trying to make the hybridization in three ways. It's a very big player in Romania and acts as a satellite to another very big player in Romania. So I think that combining all this and all the wind farms or photovoltaic plants getting BESS and stuff like that, I think things will change. Moreover, more and more in the areas where I walk around, people talk about hydrogen, and I think that also will be a game changer in the future. Right now, we are involved in a lot of projects in Romania, more than 370 megawatts building. Because, as you were saying here on stage, Romania is a very hot market, but we are also building in Germany and in Italy, actually in 15 European countries.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I think we managed with the time, and it's also we have some room for some questions from the audience. I must also conclude by saying that I consider it to be a quite pragmatic approach to what is happening, and indeed we are facing now huge, volatility and a bit of more uncertainty with respect to what is going to happen. We need to consider more sources. We need to reconsider the way we looked at the energy as, being first clean. Now we need to consider to be clean, if possible, as clean as possible, but also price effective. So some questions, please.
Thank you and congratulations on everybody for moderating. I am here with the microphone, just showing your interest and I'm there.
Hello, Maria from GE Vernova as well. I have a question on hybridization. We keep hearing battery to support the pricing, the future price of the purchase agreements. How, as investor, are you looking into now hybrids, power plants like wind and solar, or wind and battery, other technologies? Is the setup ready now to evaluate financial value of these solutions today, or things are still need to be put in place?
Can I answer? I'm not financial, but we operate a hybrid power plant. The first one that was made in Romania, we have it in our dispatch center. The setup is done from the technical perspective and from the technical norms. I mean, is nothing new. It's just another power plant that has different technology, and if it has a technical solution, it's nothing. So yes, in Romania the setup is done, and of course I believe part of the new constructions are hybrid already. Wind plus solar or solar plus storage is the most common one. Our own also are hybrid. So it's doable. It's already done. And I think from the investment point of view, it's also nothing, right? I mean, if you have the technical due diligence report, you will finance it.
I mean, maybe to add from the financial side. So obviously, to the extent where you have solutions for financing those as standalone, like solar and wind, then often we see the hybrid in countries where you're circumventing certain constraints, or you're trying to get certain benefits, which then obviously from a financial perspective or financing or investment perspective, if you have the case for individual investment, then obviously the joint investment should be possible as well. And we've seen that in other countries as well. I think where the challenge is a bit once you add new technologies like battery, the question is how much benefit do you give to that, and kind of how long term can you look at that benefit, and how proven is that benefit, and for how long do you think that benefit will be there. So it's a bit of a case by case situation then, where there's probably some benefit which helps the investment case, but and also might make it more feasible than having two standalone investments. But to the extent that's to the full satisfaction of all the stakeholders, I think there's still probably a journey to go.
Thank you. I think there's a hand over here, please.
Interestingly, that question kind of led partly to my question. My question was talking about long-term PPAs, and if we're looking at C&I, etc., particularly, I mean, as you say, CFDs are very welcome. Companies being able to make a 10, 12, 15-year decision today on something they used to make a decision 1 or 2 years ahead is incredibly difficult. Plus, in the fact that if they start talking to me about a project or Honorary or anybody else, we've either got to build it on equity, or which is risky, as Wandile also said, it's a really difficult decision to make. You're asking people to make a decision on something in 2 or 3 years' time, for a future 12, 15 years down the road. PPAs, electricity is going to be required. PPAs will be rolling. If somebody actually takes a PPA out for 7 years, I think there's a very high probability that they will continue to roll their investment. And from the investment community, I think they can start taking a take a bet on the future of power prices. I think there's work to be done, but I think they can also take a bit of a bet on the likelihood of X, Y, and Z staying with the power producer, and that actually a shorter term PPA does not necessarily mean you don't have visibility over your future income. On the one on hybrid, I can't find anybody who really knows how, from a commercial perspective, how to price batteries in with solar. They think batteries come free. I can promise you, they don't. They're still quite expensive, and at the moment the business case is largely merchant, which makes it very hard, unless it's behind the wire, and as Joel just said, it's actually offsetting some of your other risks that you're trying to do. But to date, people sit there and think, well, I can get PV in Spain for 35 euros. Why can't I get that in Romania or Poland or anywhere else? Well, it doesn't work quite like that either. So there's a lot of education to come, but I think also the from both equity, but also from the financial institutions, there has to be, you know, an evolution in how we look at the certainty of income over time.
Thank you for your comment. Maybe one more question or comment from the audience. In part because the topic that Alastair touched now is one that we will also tackle in the final session of the day, talking about batteries, other technologies, and also new business models. We'll try to find out a little bit more about. If no other question, Cornel?
I wonder if I could just come in very quickly with a response on the PPA, because I think it's a really good point. I recall, while still with the bank, having a series of conversations with a number of corporate clients around why would they not look to hedge their electricity prices. And I think what's interesting is if you look at it as a risk management tool, the pushback we very often would get was, well, we don't understand the electricity market. And yet these same companies were absolutely comfortable hedging interest rates and foreign exchange rates, which they also know nothing about because it's not their business. So I think there is an education process as well, and it's not the case in every single situation, but I truly believe that if you are a manufacturer who has a significant component of your cost is electricity, then while there is undoubtedly the risk that you may lock in at the, quotes, wrong price, at least you have some stability and you have some predictability. So I think that's a conversation which perhaps the sector needs to have more often with potential off-takers.
Yeah, I have to answer to a few things. I have two comments. One comment is about OCDE. Just to be very clear, 2026. That's the moment when we will enter into OCDE. Second thing is related to the PPE. So I have several discussions with the industry, and of course the industry, especially the energy intensive ones, which they are trying to find their way, that might have some difficulties on signing PPAs. But be aware of the fact that there is an increased interest for Romania for FDI. And those companies, they want to secure their energy market, because this is one of the reasons why they come to Romania. And basically, it will be for the ones who are still waiting to invest or to decide to invest based on PPA. Those PPA, the PPA is going to come. That's for sure. But there is a moment at this moment when they have to carefully analyze in which direction they will go.
And this is part of your work in green industry pact that you mentioned earlier. I'm not sure if I can hear myself. Yeah, it's okay. We have another question from the back of the hall, but I will use this moment for one technical issue, and I would ask you, do you consider appropriate to get rid of the break between this session and the next one and continue? Okay, we will do this. Thank you very much. I was trying to say to raise hand, but I saw many hands down. Okay.
Hi everyone, George Dragne from WTW. Happy to be here with all of everybody, and glad to hear that everybody is interested in what's going to happen on the Romanian energy ecosystem. Besides the risks we are all facing, not only in Romania. I'm thinking about the geopolitical risk and everything. It seems that a lot of energy will be produced in Romania. The question is, what are we going to do with all this energy? Is it? I mean, I'm curious to find out the investor's perspective. Is this energy for exporting, or can we think about some other opportunities, for example, attracting data centers in Romania? Because data centers, we all know, they need energy and they need good people. I think Romania has both of them, and why not?
Thank you for your question. So, where will we use all this energy? I think Mr. Spătaru said something about it. New businesses ready for Romania, but please.
Look, I think what we see is that industry tends to follow cheap energy. So, you know, as an industrial decision maker, you don't decide to build a factory unless the energy is there and available. So the surplus of cheap energy, I think, should drive industrial demand and building up Romania's industrial base. And all the factors are there. So EU membership, as again, a very highly educated workforce. If you compare Romania's workforce across Europe, it's, you know, the quantity of PhDs and university education, very, very high. So all of the kind of key factors are there, and I think, you know, that's why we're pretty excited about Romania, because we see that demand being enabled by the energy sector.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, lady. Corneliu, thank you very much for taking this very heavy responsibility against your, what you like. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready for the next session. So please join us in the room, and I will kindly invite the speaker from this first session of the day. We'll skip the break, but we will have plenty of time for conversation during the lunch immediately after this final dialogue.